Good morning. It's Wednesday, January 18th, 2017, and today will be another busy day on the Senate side of Capitol Hill with 4 confirmation hearings set to happen simultaneously beginning at 10 a.m. The hearings will feature President-elect Donald Trump's nominees for Health and Human Services Secretary, Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Commerce Secretary, and UN Ambassador. Meanwhile, at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, the final days of the Obama administration have been busy ones. Yesterday, President Obama announced that he would grant clemency to nearly 300 individuals, including Chelsea Manning, the Army private convicted of leaking a trove of military secrets to the WikiLeaks website. Manning will now be released from prison this spring rather than serving an espionage sentence through the year 2045. This morning on the Washington Journal, our phone lines are open to hear your reaction to this final twist in the Manning case. Phone lines are open. If you support President Obama's decision to grant clemency to Chelsea Manning, the number for you, 202-748-8000. If you oppose the president's decision, 202-748-8001. You can also catch up with us on social media. On Twitter, it's at CSpanWJ. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/CSpan. And a very good Wednesday morning to you. We're talking about President Obama's decision to commute the sentence of Chelsea Manning this morning. It's making the headlines of several papers around the country, national papers and local papers. Here's the front page of USA Today. Obama commutes the sentence of Chelsea Manning is the headline there. We're going to be talking more about it, but we want you to start calling in. Our phone lines are split up a little bit differently this morning. If you support the president's decision to grant clemency to Chelsea Manning, 202-748-8000 is the number for you. If you oppose the president's decision, it's 202-748-8001. A few comments from Facebook already this morning. You can join the conversation there at facebook.com/cspan. Kieran writes in this morning, this is the only good thing Obama did in the last 8 years. Punishment for showing the human rights violations of U.S. military is not a crime. I hope Snowden, too, will be given a presidential pardon before Putin makes use of his intel against the United States. Several other comments as well, including Jeff, who says that Trump is about to sell our country out to the Russians and the Republicans are worried about Chelsea Manning getting out of jail early. Looking for your thoughts this morning. Edward is in Jersey City, New Jersey, on that line for those who support the president's decision. Edward, good morning.
Good morning and Happy New Year. You're right. I do support what President Obama has done for Chelsea Manning. I was just watching an interview on CNN where Glenn Greenwald was invited to talk about this, and he was saying how Chelsea Manning is well known, was in Iraq serving and had witnessed so much it was wrong. I think this was the right thing for President Obama to do. And I agree with the first comment you read on Facebook. Also, Snowden needs to be protected. Welcome back home, and thank you so much.
Aaron is in Silver Spring, Maryland, on that line for those who oppose the president's decision. Aaron, good morning.
I'm bitterly opposed to this. Manning betrayed his fellow soldiers. There's no excuse for this. And it's particularly bitter that a commander-in-chief in time of war would pardon a traitor.
And let's get to Marcy in Elgin, Texas, on our line for those who support the president's decision. Marcy, good morning.
I do support that because I think Chelsea Manning is a great heroine. Without him, we never would have known what was going on. And that other guy was saying he betrayed his fellow soldiers. He wasn't required to show fealty to his fellow soldiers. It's to this country. And what was happening over there was flying right in the face of what everything this country stands for. I think Chelsea Manning should have been released a long time ago. Unfortunately, it won't be till May. But I support this.
Those are some of the comments this morning. You can keep calling in. We'll be talking about this for most of the first hour this morning. We showed you that headline from the front page of USA Today. The reporter on that story is Gregory Corti, White House reporter, well known by viewers on C-SPAN. He joins us on the phone now. Gregory Corti, I guess the first question is why? What explanation has the White House given for this clemency move?
Well, the White House hasn't really talked about it much on the record. I expect, as you know, President Obama is going to have a news conference this morning or this afternoon, and we'll probably hear a lot more directly from President Obama about why he took this action. But, the White House actually telegraphed this a little bit last week when White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest came out and took pains to differentiate the Chelsea Manning case from the Edward Snowden case. As you know, Chelsea Manning's case predated the Snowden disclosures by several years. And what Josh Earnest said was that the damage that was done to national security was great by Chelsea Manning, but not as great as Snowden. But more importantly, Manning was court-martialed, faced the consequences, owned up to what she did, and has already now served 7 years in a military prison, which is longer than any other leaker in a similar case in history. So that is part of the thought process. And then you also have, on top of that, the transgender issues, the treatment of Chelsea Manning in this military prison. And so she's come to become a symbol not only of the anti-war movement, the privacy movement, but also transgender activists, and was this sort of a perfect storm of a case.
And explain for our viewers the difference between commuting a sentence and granting a pardon.
Sure. A full pardon is a full legal forgiveness for a crime. It extinguishes all of the legal consequences. So it restores civil rights like gun rights, voting rights in states that prohibits felons from voting. Whereas a commutation just shortens the sentence. Since it's unclear what the consequences of this for Chelsea Manning, she still is a private in the Army. So will this eventually lead to some sort of a dishonorable discharge? We'll have to find out. But it doesn't completely wipe the slate clean legally for her. Could
it lead to some action from Donald Trump? Could the Trump administration overturn this decision in just a few days? No. The president's power to pardon is absolute. And once it's delivered to Chelsea Manning, then it's done. It's not an executive order or the type of executive action that can be undone by a successive president. And Chelsea Manning's sentence shortened by nearly 30 years. Gregory Corti, what sort of immediate reaction did you see from lawmakers on Capitol Hill after this news came out yesterday? It was swift and it was vociferous, especially from Republicans. Paul Ryan, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, John McCain, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, all very quickly denounced this, used very strong language, heard words like traitor. And they say that Chelsea Manning, who is, of course, formerly known as Bradley Manning, put American lives at risk, American soldiers, American diplomats around the world. Remember, these cables, when they were released, were hugely not only embarrassing the United States, but also disclosed some things that the United States would rather have not known. And it was the other novel thing about this when it happened, remember, is that this was the first time that a leak was done sort of through a leak of this scale was done through WikiLeaks, where all of the cables were put out there really without sort of the vetting and the reporting process that would have ordinarily gone on in previous generations on the Pentagon Papers case or previous leaks, where news organizations would at least sift through and figure out whether these disclosures would harm any sort of put any soldiers at risk. And so this was a very wide-ranging leak, and I think that's part of why Republicans are objecting to this decision so much. And Gregory Corti, before you go, nearly 300 acts of clemency were granted yesterday. Besides Chelsea Manning, what were some of the other high-profile ones? Yeah, I mean, a big one was another leak case. It was James Cartwright. He was a former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was convicted back in October of speaking to a New York Times reporter about the Stuxnet attack on Iran's nuclear program. He received a full pardon. You also had Baseball Hall of Famer Willie McCovey. San Francisco Giants, you may remember him, first baseman. He was convicted of tax evasion back in the 1990s. He was granted a full pardon. Ian Schrager was the co-founder of the Studio 54. That was also a tax case.
and you had a Puerto Rican nationalist who was convicted of a number of bombing attacks back in the 1970s and 80s. President Bill Clinton had commuted the sentence of 16 of these members of this Puerto Rican terrorist group, but this guy, his name was Rivera, Oscar Lopez Rivera. He had refused his commutation back in the when Clinton granted those commutations, because he said everyone had to be released or he would not be released. Finally, he's the last remaining one in prison. He's now in his 70s, and Obama commuted his sentence as well.
Gregory Corti has done a lot of work following acts of clemency by the presidency. You should check out his work if you're interested in it. USA Today. Thanks so much for your time, as always.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
And for our viewers, Gregory Corti there talked about the swift reaction from Capitol Hill. Here's the statement put out from Speaker Paul Ryan's office not too long after the announcement came out yesterday. Speaker Paul Ryan saying, "This is just outrageous. Chelsea Manning's treachery put American lives at risk and exposed some of our nation's most sensitive secrets. President Obama now leaves in place a dangerous precedent that those who compromise our national security won't be held accountable for their crimes." That statement from the Speaker's office. We want to hear your statements this morning. Phone lines are open to you. Lines split up by those who support the president's decision to grant clemency to Chelsea Manning and those who oppose. Eric's up next. White Plains, Maryland, on that line for those who support. Eric, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Pedro. And again, as always, thank you for C-SPAN, because you guys are the only one giving us the real news in this country. So my opinion is that actually I agree, but what about Snowden? What about Assange? Because all what they're doing is also to pretty much open our eyes about the criminal justice, especially under Obama era. But let me say one last thing. I'm very, very disappointed by the Obama administration, and I am a black man. When I think about Loretta Lynch saying Bill Clinton, when I see a thing about Eric Holder saying that he's the wingman of the president, when I think about the FBI director Carvey with all what he did, the criminal justice has just become a joke under Obama. When I think about the sanctuary cities,
Eric, we want to stick to Chelsea Manning this morning. That's our topic that we're asking our viewers about. You mentioned Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. Tweets yesterday. This one from Edward Snowden saying, "Let it be said here in earnest with good heart. Thanks, Obama." And from WikiLeaks, Julian Assange's WikiLeaks website, this is the official statement from WikiLeaks. Ms. Manning is the longest-serving whistleblower in the history of the United States. Her 35-year sentence for disclosing information that served the public interest and never caused harm to the United States was always excessive, and we're delighted that justice is being served in the form of this commutation. John is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, supports the president's decision. John, good morning.
Hello, John. Thanks a lot. Listen, I just jotted a few things down. I'm just going to run them by you. It'll only take me a minute. Okay, what is patriotism? All religions pretty much stress honesty, integrity. We also always hear about speaking truth to power. Military motto, duty, honor, country, and our Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all. We say we're the shining city on the hill. All the world looks up to us because of our ideals. Sounds like hypocrisy. Now, it's very difficult for a young person, a teenage up to about 25, to lose his ideals, to lose his illusions. It's very painful. There's cognitive dissonance. That's a psychological term. That means it's psychologically painful when you have go, don't go, when you have orders to do this and to not do this. Which do you choose? It can turn you into a do loop like a computer, that just breaks down. Okay, did his parents teach him to be honest? Honorable? Was he a Boy Scout? Boy Scout pledge says to be honest. Sunday school and church? That's all I have to say. I support it.
All right.
I'm grateful.
All right, John in Pennsylvania this morning. a few tweets as well as we've been having this conversation. Jody saying Obama obviously thinks that when bad people are caught doing bad things, it's not the fault of the one who blows the whistle. Me too. Carol says Obama granted clemency to Manning as a thank you to the LGBT community and give a last dig to Republicans. And Richard Rogers says Manning's pardon is dubious, not President Barack Obama's wisest decision, with a question mark at the end of that. Victor is in Sparks, Nevada, opposes the president's move. Victor, good morning. Victor, you with us? We'll go to Alicia, who's waiting in Baltimore, Maryland, also opposes. Alicia, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for opening the phones to dialogue for regular people like me. I do oppose because information is a very, very delicate commodity. When you have the ability to have information or insight on something that is very, very delicate, that can put lives in danger, lives that are outside of this country, inside of this country, doesn't matter, our lives. You have to measure very well and very good the channel that you want to communicate that information through. I used to work for NPR in Capital Public Radio in Sacramento, California. And through the wire, as you probably know, there is a lot of information that sometimes we people cannot divulge so freely. And the reason is because it can create a lot of concern on people that are less educated. I understand that America is being founded under the premise of free speech and a lot of other things that make this country so well known for. However, between free speech and a lot of different things that can happen due to free speech, I oppose. I really don't think that it's a good idea to divulge information to people that to be less educated. And I'm sorry, less educated to understand it.
And Alicia, how do you decide who's educated enough to understand it?
Well, it's very simple. When we have press, the newspapers that print in 8th grade canon of classification, you know that there's a few pieces of information that can put people in danger that, it's not okay to divulge. 8th grade education is what the newspapers are printing. And, 8th grade education is a kid that does not know exactly how to manage the information. I understand that sometimes the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, whatever other situation, they don't act upon information right away because they need to check the sources, they need to check a lot of different things. To divulge information in a way in where you are telling it to 8th grade people, I have my reservations with that.
All right, that's Alicia in Baltimore, Maryland. AFP with a graphic talking about both the timeline of the disclosures from Chelsea Manning and what some of the more prominent releases were. Just to run through that very quickly, former Bradley Manning was a military intelligence analyst in Iraq from November 2009 until his arrest in May 2010. The then 22-year-old was arrested in Iraq for handling classified U.S. documents over to WikiLeaks. In August of 2013, Manning was found guilty of espionage, fraud, and theft by releasing 250,000 diplomatic cables, 500,000 military reports, military videos from Iraq and Afghanistan, and documents on people detained in Guantanamo Bay. Some of those you might remember: a video of a U.S. helicopter strike in Baghdad in 2007 that killed 2 Reuters employees, more than 90,000 classified U.S. military documents relating to Afghanistan, 400,000 military reports from Iraq from the years 2004 to 2009, and more than 250,000 classified U.S. diplomatic cables that started appearing in November of 2010. We're talking about Chelsea Manning's clemency decision from the Obama administration yesterday. Janet is on the line for those who support the president's decision. Janet in Des Moines, Iowa. Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Janet.
I am extremely supportive of this decision for several reasons. Number one, the information that was shared, how it was published is maybe a point of contention as far as what was published in detail, like a document dump. That was out of control for Manning. But the crimes that Manning exposed were much worse than the crime of exposing them. So if I put myself in Chelsea's situation at that time, and I saw those videos of people getting shot, knew about the torture that was going on, it's against the law, basically that the government, our government was acting as war criminals, I would probably have made the same choice. And I think the American people need to know what we're actually doing.
It's Janet in Iowa. A couple of our viewers have asked, what about Edward Snowden? As Gregory Cordy pointed out, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest recently talked about what he called the stark difference between the Chelsea Manning case and the Edward Snowden case. Here is the Press Secretary Josh Earnest's comments from that press briefing last Friday.
Chelsea Manning is somebody who went through the military criminal justice process, was exposed to due process, was found guilty, was sentenced for her crimes, and she acknowledged wrongdoing. Mr. Snowden fled into the arms of an adversary, and has sought refuge in a country that most recently made a concerted effort to undermine confidence in our democracy. So I think the situation of these two individuals is quite different. I can't speculate at this point about to what degree that will have an impact on the president's consideration of clemency requests. But I know that there's a temptation, because the crimes were relatively similar, to lump the two cases together, but there are some important differences, including the scale of the crimes that were committed and the consequences of their crimes. Obviously, as Chelsea Manning has acknowledged, and as we have said many times, the release of the information that she provided to WikiLeaks was damaging to national security. But the disclosures by Edward Snowden were far more serious and far more dangerous.
And some news on Edward Snowden, this in today's Washington Times. On the same day that President Obama commuted almost all of Chelsea Manning's remaining sentence, another well-known hacker, Edward Snowden, got a gift from the Kremlin. The Russian government announced Wednesday afternoon that Edward Snowden had his asylum in Russia extended. Snowden has just extended the term of his residence permit in Russia for another couple years, according to a spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry. Again, that report in the Washington Times, if you want to read more on that. We're asking our viewers about your reaction to the Chelsea Manning decision yesterday out of the White House. JR is waiting in Woodlawn, Tennessee, opposes the president's decision. JR, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I'd like to start out, first of all, as talking as a veteran. I believe this is Obama's final step for a slap in the face of all veterans and all active duty personnel. He has never once, the whole time in office, showed a real honest step of showing his respect for the military. Why? Because he doesn't have it. Nor does a majority of Democrats. They talk about how they support the troops, but when they can find the chance to slap a vet or active duty in the face, they do it, and they do it willingly. Second of all, a gentleman that spoke earlier and talked about 25-year-olds and their ideals. When you make a choice to join the military, you should know why you are making that decision. It's not a light decision to make. Why? Because you're laying your life on the line for your country, number one. Number two, because you should have already had the ideals that your country is you. And by serving in the military, you serve because you love your country, not because you expect your country to abide by what you believe.
JR, did you serve during the time that the Manning leaks came out?
No.
When did you serve?
But, I got out in '92. I served during the first Gulf War. Served time in Germany.
And do you remember conversations about whistleblowers at the time that you were in the military? What did you and your fellow soldiers think about whistleblowers?
Well, I never heard so much about whistleblowers. I heard about people divulging classified information. While I was in Germany, there was a soldier that had made an attempt to sell information to Russia, which at the time was the Soviet Union. And they court-martialed him and threw him in prison like he deserved because he's a traitor to his country. The same thing with this Manning. They're a traitor to their country.
That's JR in Tennessee this morning, a veteran. There is also several veterans who serve in Congress. Some comments from a few of them yesterday. This is Martha McSally, the congresswoman who is a former Air Force colonel, Republican, saying this is an insult to all those serving honorably. Manning put their lives at risk by stealing classified info and disseminating it to the world. Steve Pierce is a veteran, served in the Air Force in Vietnam, a Vietnam vet, said this is horrific action for a president leaving office in less than 3 days. The precedent now stands. Compromising national security is nothing more than time served, a minor offense. Steve Pierce, Republican from New Mexico. One of several members of Congress weighing in yesterday. We'll show you a few more of those as we go, but we want to hear mostly from you, our viewers, this morning about the president's action yesterday. John is in West Palm Beach, Florida, opposes the clemency granting yesterday. John, go ahead.
Yes, John, and I like your name. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please don't refer to him as a whistleblower. This man committed treason, and the motive that nobody ever hears is that Bradley Manning was a homosexual who was upset with the don't ask, don't tell policy. You got to remember back then that was a hot issue, and that will never come out. I doubt very much that he thought he was being a patriot by releasing information that, and you keep saying put people's risk at lives. We have operatives and agents that were murdered because of the release of this information, and that's not in that little newspaper article you quoted. That's not your fault, but you never see the truth anymore in the media. That's why people voted for Trump, because we're sick and tired of the hypocrisy. And as far as Obama, I mean, his motive is clear. He's just bumming it in the eye of the American people. He hates the military, and his idea is a socialist utopia. But I can't tell you how disgusting this is. And it's kind of funny coming from the Obama administration, who is so concerned about the hacking of Russia, but they're not concerned about a person that committed treason.
John, before you go, on the murders of U.S. Undercover agents, is that something that you've seen other places? Is that a source that I'm missing?
Well, yeah, because it's never reported. But you got to remember what he released. He released information that would identify people who were working, cooperating with us, Iraqis, Afghanistan people. I mean, what do you think's going to happen when the other side gets a hold of this information? It's like an old spy novel, you know, when the spy gives up, you know, he gets caught by the Russians and he gives up information that kills agents in East Berlin. It's the same thing. People died because of what he did. And
John, thought you were done. That's John in Florida. It's 7:30 on the East Coast this morning. We are about 2.5 hours away from a very busy day on Capitol Hill. There's 4 hearings for Donald Trump nominees happening simultaneously or almost simultaneously this morning. It begins at 10 a.m. On the Senate side, Congressman Tom Price is up for his confirmation hearing to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. That'll be in the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. You can watch that on C-SPAN this morning. We're going to be going to that at about 10 o'clock. You can also listen to the hearing on the C-SPAN radio app or go to cspan.org. Also at 10 in the Senate Environment Public Works Committee, there'll be the confirmation hearing for Scott Pruitt, the Oklahoma Attorney General, who is up to head the Environmental Protection Agency. That'll be live on C-SPAN 3 when it starts at 10 again. C-SPAN 2, I apologize. Again, you can also see that on cspan.org as well. And then Wilbur Ross is up for Commerce Secretary. His confirmation hearing also set to begin at 10 in the Senate Commerce Committee. You can watch that on cspan.org. And then Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, up for UN ambassador. Her hearing is in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That's happening today just after 10, scheduled to start at about 10 a.m. That you can see on C-SPAN 3 and, of course, again on cspan.org. So we'll run through those a couple times during our program today to keep you updated on where you can see all of that. Also, always go to cspan.org to check our listings as well. As we said, a very busy day on Capitol Hill, on the Senate side of Capitol Hill. Back to the phones. Have about 20 minutes left in this segment. Talking about President Obama's decision to commute the sentence of Chelsea Manning. Want to get your thoughts, lines for those who support and oppose the president's action. Gabriel is in Los Angeles, California. Supports what the president did yesterday. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Hey, I think that the decision was a good one. I mean, in a way, because it opens the door to kind of dialogue with all the WikiLeaks people, and I think that's maybe where Obama was coming from. It's like, you know, you need to redress this, and I know there's so much support for Manning and, you know, the different aspects of this thing, and I think that he in some weird crazy wisdom, he like opened the door for that.
Explain that to me. What sort of dialogue do we want to have with WikiLeaks right now?
Well, you know, I mean, I think that the thing is there's a lot of people like on both sides. I know that Obama, that's the crazy thing, is I think Obama on one side does not, you know, he's been kind of hard line on this, on his approach with them. But on the other hand, maybe like in his, you know, end of his reign or whatever, like he wanted to open the door to sort of a dialogue with them. And I think with Trump obviously with the Russian connection, all that sort of stuff, like maybe Trump is more open-minded to that, and so he wanted to open that door and let Trump deal with the you know, bring in the WikiLeaks guy back into the fold and trying to figure that out.
Kevin McCarthy, the House Majority Leader, in his statement yesterday. And part of that statement, he said this decision is ironic, given the recent rhetoric from the administration. It will embolden future leakers who will be led to believe that there will not be serious consequences for their actions. As we said, several members of Congress putting out statements yesterday. Want to hear your statements, though, this morning on the Washington Journal. Leonard is in Kentucky, opposes the president's actions. Leonard, go ahead.
Yes, I finally got to. I've been trying for a week to get through. They talking about giving the woman that, or man, whatever she is, the pardon, and I don't think that's right. I think if she done wrong, she should serve her time, 35 years. And they talk about him going to give Bird Dog a leniency, and I don't think that's right either. And they don't talk about Hillary giving away all the information, and they said the FBI says they don't have nothing, but they've got to have something. You know, it may be right, it might be wrong. I don't know.
Leonard,
and I appreciate having talked with you.
Does it make a difference to you, Leonard, that this wasn't a pardon, that the president just commuted more than 20 years off Chelsea Manning's sentence, but Chelsea Manning has written in her request for clemency that she takes full responsibility for her decision to disclose the materials to the public, saying that she pleaded guilty without the protection of a plea agreement because she believed the military justice system would understand my motivation for the disclosure and sentence me fairly. She said I was wrong in that decision. Does that make a difference to you, Leonard?
Yeah, I think he's wrong, and I think he's doing a lot of things because he's against Trump, and he's for Hillary, still for Hillary, always be for Hillary, and I don't think it's right.
All right. Anthony is in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Line for those who support the president's decision. Anthony, good morning.
Good morning. All I really wanted to, I didn't have that much to say. Mostly, yes, obviously, I do support the president's decision. I was hoping this would further lead into some sort of clemency for Edward Snowden, but of course, we'd actually have to arrest and convict him first, I suppose. But I want to point out that these people are not only whistleblowers, not just patriots, but really American heroes. They are heroes not only, perhaps not of America's current goals, but of America's timeless values. Thank you. I hope you have a great day and good luck.
What are those timeless values, Anthony, that you see? Anthony hung up. Ken is in Washington, D.C., supports the president's action yesterday. Ken, good morning.
I appreciate your time. Yeah, I absolutely do. I support the president. You know, he has the authority to grant clemency to individuals and pardon them if need be. And you know, the United States, in particular, presidents typically wait until the end of their tenure before they start making those changes. For instance, John McCain was fully pardoned for the things that he did in Vietnam as a POW, and a lot of his fellow soldiers and airmen and other prisoners of war had asked and requested for him to be brought up on war crimes charges because of the fact that he was giving a lot of information. And it wasn't misinformation, it was accurate information. And then on top of that, when he returns to Capitol Hill in the latter part of the 80s and 90s, he then suppressed the government from going back and finding POWs and bringing back remains. So, I don't think that this arrives at that level. So I trust the president's judgment in this instance.
All right. The Washington Times showing presidential clemency by administration. You can see the Obama administration on the far right has used commutations much more than past presidencies, although has used the president's pardon power less than most. 212 pardons granted by President Obama in his time in office, 1,385 commutations granted. You can see how that compares with George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and so on down the line. Jim is in Enterprise, Alabama, opposes the president's actions yesterday regarding Chelsea Manning. Jim, go ahead.
Well, thank you for taking my call. this young man or woman or whatever he is should have been court-martialed and hung. There is no excuse for what he did, and there is no excuse for what the president did for him. I spent 22 years in the Army, and I believe that the president and his party does not care for anything that is military.
In what ways has the president demonstrated that before what happened yesterday to you, Jim?
Oh, the way he cut the military, everything that he gave to the Iranians, he has done nothing for the military or this country.
All right, David is in Fenton, Michigan. Also opposes the clemency move by the president yesterday. David, go ahead.
Absolutely. And I would like to know if Bradley, because he came out of his mother and father's womb, is not a girl, he's actually a man. I want to know if he's responsible for the towers going down in New York. A year before that, he leaked this information, and then the towers went down in New York. What connection does he have to that? And like the man said just before me, treason to this country is what kind of crime? As far as the Supreme Court's concerned, what is a punishment for treason to this country? Now, if Barack Obama will let a traitor out of prison to make him look good, he'll put that jeopardizes the security of the United States. That's our own president jeopardizing the security of the United States? That doesn't make any sense, really.
David, I just want to talk about your timeline a little bit. In 2001, then Bradley Manning would have been a teenager. The leaks that were given to WikiLeaks didn't start happening until after he began serving as an intelligence analyst in Iraq in November 2009. The releases that we started seeing started happening in 2010. So that's the timeline on that. Joni is in Austin, Texas, supports what the president did. Joni, good morning.
Good morning. I wish some of the people that are calling in would understand what compassion means and how important compassion is, and how our culture is a leadership in the world of helping with that. That I think people like, Chelsea Manning and many others are making a lot of difficult decisions in their lives, wrestling with issues that the American public are now wrestling with. We need to also consider the fact that what is classified. I mean, we are hearing more and more now that one office will classify almost anything. Anybody can classify anything if you're in the government and you have the pen. If your hand is holding the pen in a powerful position, you can limit what anybody else gets to know. Pages and documents get passed to another office within our government with whole pages blacked out. How can we be a democracy if we don't know what's going on? We've got to wrestle with these issues. Thank you.
A few other tweets from viewers. Rick this morning says Manning committed a crime, but the sentence clearly did not match the crime. It was way too harsh, and Obama was right to do it. Barkaway with a tweet this morning saying Americans need to get over this idea that we're the squeaky clean moral beacons of the world and all else are evil or lowly. George is in New Hampshire, opposes the president's move yesterday for clemency for Manning. George, go ahead.
All right, so I have the utmost of respect for military. However, what Manning did put many lives at risk, and it set like a very dangerous precedent for criminals or others who might even be now more inclined to illegally release classified reports or videos, knowing that they may not receive the full effect of justice for the crime they commit. I do support keeping the public really informed. However, the means through which Manning attempted to do this, I think, did a tremendous disservice to not only his fellow military, but to his country as well.
Bob is in Indiana, also opposes the president's action yesterday. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I oppose what the president did, and I think that if it hadn't been a homosexual, he wouldn't have done it.
And why is that, Bob? The Wall Street Journal touches on this topic in their column today, saying that the commutation sends a dreadful message to others in the military who might have grievances or other problems but haven't stolen national secrets. The lesson is that if you claim gender dysphoria or some other politically correct condition, you can betray your country and get off lightly. Wall Street Journal editorial board calling it a politically correct clemency. Obama springs gender celebrity Chelsea Manning from prison is the subhead on their lead editorial today. As we said, several members of the United States Congress having served in the military. Another one of those is Tom Cotton from Arkansas, served in combat operations in Iraq, appeared yesterday on CNN. CNN tweeting out his interview, his reaction to the Chelsea Manning news. Here's Tom Cotton on CNN.
Troops and our diplomats, our intelligence officers, allies who have helped us around the world. This was grave harm to our national security. Chelsea Manning is serving a sentence and should continue to serve that sentence. There'll be a time to review her sentence and seek a parole in the future according to normal criminal procedures. But for the president, especially the president who's made so much recently about the danger that WikiLeaks has posed to our national security to commute Private Manning's sentence, I just think it's very disappointing.
Some of the headlines from papers around the country about the Chelsea Manning news. Here's the front page of the Daily News. Prison breaks is the headline they went with. President orders freedom for WikiLeaks spy and the 1970s terrorist amid record pardon push. You can see the headline there with a picture of Chelsea Manning and a picture of Oscar Lopez Rivera, who Gregory Corti of USA Today talked about in our interview with him. Here's the East Bay Times. Obama to let leaker go free is the lead story in that newspaper this morning. To the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Army source for WikiLeaks will be freed. Many of the newspapers around the country leading with this story today. We've got about 10 minutes left to talk about it. Want to hear your thoughts. And as we said, we split up the lines by those who support. 202-748-8000 is the number. If you oppose the president's actions yesterday, 202-748-8001. We'll get back to your calls in just a second. Just want to update you on some news on former President George H.W. Bush, hospitalized in Houston. Looking for the latest from that, the Houston Chronicle in their story from a few hours ago, noting that he was admitted to the Houston Methodist Hospital after falling ill. They quote Gene Becker, who is his chief of staff, saying he's there, he's fine, he's doing very well. She said the doctors have a couple of theories about Bush's condition, but he is responding to treatment. They note that the former president, who lives in Houston, is expected to be discharged in the next couple of days. He's 92 years old. And the story notes that in July 2015, he was taken to a hospital in Portland, Maine, after he fractured a bone in his neck in a fall at the family summer home in Kennebunkport. So we'll look for updates on the former president's condition and give it to you if there is news throughout our program today. Back to the phones. John, Orange Park, Florida, supports what the president did yesterday. John, go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm a veteran, and one of the things that I wrestle with, not only as a veteran, but as a black man, is when do you oppose an order of your superior? And it was made clear that you can always oppose an order if it's immoral or illegal, just like the German troops could not escape killing Jews. Just like these veterans who stay so long in the military and get in the attitude of my country right or wrong. No, it is not. This is a democracy. My country, if she's right, and she better be right every time. These are the same guys that use people throughout the world and then kick them to the curb when they're taking what the hell they want to take out of them. All right, thank you very much.
Jack is in Dover, New Hampshire. Opposes clemency for Chelsea Manning. Jack, go ahead.
Good morning, John. Thanks for taking my call. Yes, I'm opposed to this. I'm a veteran of 25 years, And as your previous callers, I agree with a lot of them that this is a treason offense. And 100 years ago, they just take him out and shot him. I don't think his sentence should have been commuted.
Jack,
and thank you.
Jack, have you listened to the other callers? Is there any gray area here in your mind, or is this pretty simple?
No, it's pretty straight. I mean, he admitted to leaking these documents, and whether it did or did not cause the death of somebody, I would suspect that there was probably some people killed. That, as I think John was at a call that said, a lot of that stuff doesn't come forward in the media, mainstream.
All right, let's go to Xavier in Arlington, Virginia. Supports the president's action yesterday. Xavier, good morning.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I absolutely support what the president did. I think when it comes to Republicans specifically, there's always a double standard. Like when John McCain was a prisoner of war and he gave us information, I'm not denouncing his service, but he always gets the free pass on that, and we never talk about it. But when Chelsea Manning releases information that, talks about some of the war crimes we committed over in the Middle East, I think it's important because, if you look into some of the documents in the videos, it shows that we actually bombed hospitals and doctors and certain people. And I think it's important. I think he should have gone even further and pardoned Edward Snowden, too. And because they let us know the information that the government isn't telling us.
Xavier, did you listen to the caller before you as you were waiting and his concern about the danger that these releases put U.S. citizens, U.S. troops into, that he saw it as simply a matter of right and wrong?
And that's where it gets kind of tricky about what information is being released in what fashion. And I think there has to be some type of punishment, but I think depending on the information, it wasn't even, the information Chelsea released was not even that important. I think it was secret, and they're like levels above secret, which are far more important. I think, so in this, it's all circumstantial, I think.
Do you think that it should have been up to Chelsea Manning to decide what was secret enough to keep and what was not secret enough to be put out there?
To some degree, yes, because I think as long as she's not putting the lives of U.S. troops at risk, as long as she's just revealing some of the bad practices the U.S. takes, and even some of our allies too, I think that's fine.
Let's go to Rodney in California. Also supports the president's actions yesterday. Rodney, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, C-SPAN. Thank God for C-SPAN. I support what the president did because, if you go to Wikipedia, you'll find that from George Bush on up to Barack Obama, there's been clemency and pardons given since George Washington, I think including George Washington himself and James Garfield and Thomas Jefferson. They all been pardoned and given clemency at one time or another. But this lady here or this person, she did admit she was wrong, and 7 years is the stiffest sentence anybody has ever been given. But to my Republican friends, I would like to say, take a good look at Donald Trump right now and see what he's doing to the country. I mean, every time Obama does something, they got so much to say, like he don't care about this country. Obama loves this country. Of course, Trump does too. He made his billions here. But look what he's doing with Vladimir Putin, how he's putting us at risk. He went straight to Taiwan and dealing with Taiwan. When we don't deal with, we got a one China rule here globally. So, I'm just saying that, let's be reasonable. Let's try to have fairness for everybody on both sides of the aisle, and I hope people just take another look at Trump because he's pulling the wool over a lot of people's eyes while we're sitting right here looking right at him. And he's the worst threat. This Chelsea is not a threat. Chelsea Manning is not a threat. Thank you very much.
Chelsea Manning, again, arrested and has been in jail since May of 2010, was found guilty in August of 2013. It was a 35-year sentence that Chelsea Manning was given. It'll end in May, with President Obama having cut short that sentence by over 2 decades. Getting your thoughts, just a few minutes left in this segment. Orlando is in Valley, Alabama, opposes the president's actions yesterday. Orlando, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I would like to say that I think it was terribly wrong because it gives other people ideas that they may be able to do this thing. And I'm a student of history, and if you look back as far as 200 years and 300 years back to the 1700s, you see what happened in France, how the effeminates and things like that got wedged into government, and they began to change laws and get lax because they didn't believe in one country. They believed kind of like today, like the world should all be one big globe. But you've got good countries and bad countries. And some places he would be killed instantly. This country don't do that. But I think if you commit a crime in this country, you should pay. And the federal government ought not to be in the business of picking favorites just because somebody's mind's all twisted up and they think they're a woman and they can't look down between their legs and see what they really are. I think.
All right, we'll go on to Tony, who's waiting in Bradenton, Florida, supports the president's actions yesterday. Tony, good morning.
Yes. What's the difference? I supported that. But what's the difference of being a draft dodger and releasing people from Trump and his doctor should both be in the old slammer themselves. If you could draft dodge with a little toe being out of place, there's something wrong in this country when you get drafted. And these doctors that give them the okay, they should be held liable for that. Thank you.
A few human rights groups putting out statements yesterday as well at the same time that several Republican members of Congress were opposing the president's actions yesterday. The Amnesty International USA putting out a statement applauding the president's action, saying Chelsea Manning exposed serious abuses, and as a result, her own human rights have been violated by the U.S. government for years. President Obama was right to commute her sentence, but it is long overdue. It is unconscionable that she languished in prison for years, while those allegedly implicated by the information that she revealed still haven't been brought to justice. And one other statement from the American Civil Liberties Union yesterday from their LGBT project director, saying we are all better off knowing that Chelsea Manning will walk out of prison a free woman dedicated to making the world a better place and fighting for justice for so many. Alan is in Washington, opposes the president's actions yesterday. Alan, good morning.
Well, of course. He always so upset about Russia and the Democrats and all that, but yet he'll turn somebody loose that killed people. He'd ready to start World War because Hillary Clinton didn't get to be elected president, but he's perfectly willing to let people out of jail that are criminals. Always has been a criminal lover, always will be, and never had a brain in his head.
A little more information on that Puerto Rican nationalist who was released yesterday, whose release was announced yesterday. It was another one of those clemency requests that were granted yesterday. We're talking about Oscar Lopez Rivera. He played a role in a Puerto Rican nationalist group linked to more than 100 bombings in New York and other cities in the 1970s and 80s. Oscar Lopez Rivera had been serving a 70-year sentence after being convicted of numerous charges, including seditious conspiracy, a charge used by those plotting to overthrow the United States government. He was linked to the radical group known as FALN, the Spanish acronym for the Armed Forces of National Liberation, and was one of more than a dozen group members convicted in the 1980s. Under President Obama's commutation order, Mr. Lopez Rivera's prison sentence will expire May 17th. It was one of the 209 grants of commutation by the president announced Tuesday. There's also dozens of pardons announced yesterday as well. Time for just a few more calls. Chuck is in Alabama, opposes the president's actions. Chuck, good morning.
Well, I think, first of all, what happened with this Chelsea Manning is very low level. I mean, people talk about treason. Treason is when the President of the United States goes out here and takes people in Guantanamo, knowing they've killed Americans, have been involved in it, and turns them loose. My question, and I'm former military, is obviously he must be getting paid for releasing these people, because I don't think any president worth their salt would even consider returning these people. You know, so we want to talk about treason. Maybe they should take a good look at Obama.
Chuck's our last caller in this segment of the Washington Journal. But coming up,